Welcome to the Bookies Plus weekly betting show where you'll get free NFL picks from week 2 from our gambling experts. Now, remember, you can find our free picks at bookies.com/picks. Not only NFL picks for free, we've got you covered just about any sport that you want to wager on. Don't forget, there's a new episode of this show every week. This week, we'll have picks from Bill Speros, the senior betting analyst at bookies.com. Adam, the ATM Thompson, spitting out 20s, maybe hundreds, one of the nation's premier handicappers. Nick the Whale Whalen. You know, Nick has been in the industry for a decade now. NFL, NBA, you know, from RotoWire, VSiN, DraftKings analyst. I'm Jim Coventry, and it is time to get to some week 2 picks. We are starting out. Bill and myself are going to talk Broncos. Bill, kick us off.
Well, this is another Indiana Jones sequel that's going to be a dud. It is going to bust at the box office. Danny Jones had the game of his life against the XFL Dolphins last week. The Broncos are going to show him stuff he hasn't seen in a long time. Their defense is going to dominate this game. The Colts are going to crash back down to earth, and Danny Dimes is going to feel like he's back at MetLife. Broncos were tops in the league against the spread last year. This is a great number. I'm all in for Denver.
Yeah, Bill hit the key points. I mean, the line is set, I think, largely in part because it had impressive week 1 performance. Like Bill said, was it really impressive? They played Miami. Miami is a corpse that's dead on arrival at this point. And Indy, the defense looked nice. I mean, Lou Anarumo cooked up a real nice defense, but again, it was Miami's dysfunctional offense. And Sean Payton, I think, had to have learned from last week. He let Bo Nix throw the ball 40 times, and Nix looked terrible. Didn't mix in the run till late. I don't think he makes that mistake here. I think they get the ball running, and I think that's going to help them as well. Like Bill said, this number is way too small for this one. It's not one of these looks too good to be true. This one, Danny Dimes is going to give the ball over a bunch of times. Adam and Nick, you both have Lions picks here. Why don't you start off, Adam?
Yeah, the Lions, they got humbled last week. Let's be honest. That was supposed to be a game of the week type of game in Green Bay. They got blitzed right away. Jordan Love did what he wanted. It got surprising, to say the least. I thought Detroit would at least hang in Green Bay, but I think this is a great bounce back spot here. Interesting with Goff at quarterback and Campbell at coach, they've covered 10 straight coming off a loss. So they don't wallow in their misery very long. They have goldfish mentality. They get right back at it. And on the flip side, the Bears, they haven't won a road game in September in 5 years. And Caleb Williams on short rest. It's only a 1 day extra on short rest. 0-3 as a quarterback, 13 points per game in those games. So now you're going in a dome, you're going against a motivated, hungry Lions team. And I think -5.5, anything under -7.5, I thought was a pretty good value. I was surprised where this number was. So yeah, I like Detroit to get back on track here big time.
Nick, go ahead and pile on.
Yeah, well, Adam's right about shopping around on a lot of these games, frankly, this weekend. I mean, even Denver, Indy, the contest lines just came out for the Circa Million contest. That game's a pick'em at Circa. And it's Denver -2.5 right now over at FanDuel. So make sure you do shop around. We're seeing a lot of variation with this Lions line as well. I jumped on this at 4.5 late Monday night. We've seen significant movement up to 6.5 now at some books. I think I agree with Adam in every way. This is a huge bounce back spot for Detroit. Lions obviously didn't play well in Green Bay. To me, that was more about the Green Bay defense just playing an all-time game. That was as good as the Packers defense to me has looked in a long time, just flying around, 3-4 guys in on every tackle. And I don't think Detroit, frankly, was expecting that. It's still one of the best skill groups in the NFL. Obviously you lose Ben Johnson, and if you want to chalk that up to why they kind of no-showed that game against Green Bay, sure, maybe I'll give you that. But why did we not see more improvement from the Chicago Bears? Like this, for me, as much as I like the Lions, it's almost an equal fade on Chicago. I mean, just an unconscionable second half, blowing that game. It all started with that holding penalty that backs them up. They missed the field goal. And just a complete collapse. It's still a defense that's banged up. I think they should get Jalen Johnson back this week, which helped. But you're without one of your other starting corners going up against an elite offense. And frankly, I don't trust Caleb Williams. I don't know how you could. He started 10 for 10. He had some nice scrambles against Minnesota. I thought it looked exactly the same as last year. I thought we would see more of an immediate Ben Johnson, jump in competency, jump in confidence for that offense. I saw the same old Caleb Williams just scrambling around and missing throws.
Well, there it is. We have Bill and myself on the Broncos to start, Adam and Nick on the Lions. This has been a friendly show. Week 1, we've had a lot of agreement, a lot of pats on the backs. We're getting our first street fight right here. We got Bill going with the Patriots, and Adam's going to follow up with the Dolphins. Same game, different sides. Bill, put the gloves on. Let's go.
There's no reason to put gloves on there. Both teams are terrible. The difference is that the problems with the Patriots are problems that can be fixed on the field. Drake May overthrowing his receivers, his jittery presence in the pocket, the fact that they didn't run the ball, the fact that their defense fell asleep against Geno Smith, pre-snap penalties. These are all things that can be fixed. And I think the Dolphins offer the perfect opportunity for that. The problems with the Dolphins are systemic. Their organization from top to bottom is in chaos and it's in failure. It's like, when a plane runs out of gas in midair. I mean, there's nothing the players can do to fix this mess, especially given that they've more or less quit on this coach who could very well be fired and replaced by Bill Belichick, if not next week, certainly by the end of the season. I'm going to let Nick get out your bingo card. I want you to ponder this. Opening day 2027, Bill Belichick in his size 5X Dolphins hoodie and 48 Double D moves with a very pregnant Jordan Hudson carrying little Billy the Fourth in her arms, breaks the all-time NFL win record as the Dolphins coach against the Patriots. Think about that.
Okay.
Most of that thought was graphically disgusting, but I love it because I can totally see it happening. Any other comments on that before we get to the other side of this game? No, definitely stunned silence here. I love that. Great call, Bill. Adam, counterpoint.
Well, first off, I think that needs to be on Call Sheet or Polymarket or somewhere, because that would be, I would like to see both sides of that. I think you got better chances of that than Jesus Christ showing up before the next election or whatever that one is. But yeah, it's tough to disagree with a lot of what Bill says. I mean, no team was more humbled and humiliated in week 1 than the Miami Dolphins. They got run over by Daniel Jones and that offense and Jonathan Taylor. They got some players over there, but that was bad. I think I think this is a good spot for them to bounce back if they're going to ever bounce back. I think it has to be here. No Christian Gonzalez, I think, is an epic deal for them. They didn't have him last week, and Geno Smith threw for 362 yards on them with no receivers worth throwing to at all. Now Tua 7-0 against the spread all time against the Patriots. And he has weapons. Are these weapons faded and old and broken down? I guess we're going to find out, because I think this is a perfect opportunity for them to bounce back. -1.5 at home in Miami. I think if they don't get it done here, then I agree. I think there's going to be a coaching change. We do first coach fired odds. McDaniel is right up there at the top. And if this is a loss, it's going to go to minus odds, I'm pretty sure, for Mikey to be out of town. But I think it's a good spot. I think New England's going to improve. They have a new coach. He's a veteran coach, but it's a new coach here with a very young team, a lot of rookies on this roster. I think it's just going to take a little longer to gel. And Miami's up against the wall. It's now or never for them.
So if Bill has it his way, we'll see another Tyreek Hill explosion, but 20 times worse than last week on the sidelines. If Adam's right, we'll have to wait a couple weeks. We'll see how that shakes out. Well, that wasn't bad for the first fight of the season. Nick and I are be a little bit nicer. We both like the Bengals here. Nick, go ahead. Tell us about the Bengals.
Yeah, buying a little bit low, I think, on Cincinnati. To me, this number should probably be a little bit higher, and more than anything, selling high on the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got the punching bag that is the Carolina Panthers at home last week. Credit to the Jags for taking care of business. They racked up 200 rushing yards on that horrible Panthers defense, but I didn't necessarily love what I saw out of Trevor Lawrence, Jim. I thought he was still shaky, still missing throws down the field. We didn't really see a whole lot of explosion from that Jags passing game. It looked a lot like it did last season. You could make the argument that once the Jags built a multi-score lead, maybe they're saving some things for this brutal stretch of schedule coming up. But overall was just not really impressed by Trevor Lawrence. Lawrence has also been a very bad quarterback on the road. He's 8-21 straight up in his career away from Jacksonville. You look at the Jaguars defense, again, played well against the Carolina Panthers last week. This was a defense that forced almost no turnovers last season. There's hasn't been a ton of integration of talent into that defense relative to last year. So I don't think you can count on 2 or 3 turnovers like you can when you play the Carolina Panthers. Bengals, obviously coming off of a brutal showing last week, absolutely should have lost that game to the Cleveland Browns. At the same time, I think that sets them up for a pretty big bounce back here. I think if you're Jacksonville, you almost don't want Cincinnati to have played that badly offensively. There's no way they repeat that again this week. Bengals offensive line, that does worry me. The Jags have a reasonable pass rush with Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, but the advantage at quarterback is just so strong for Cincinnati. And again, the Jags defense was not really tested last week against Bryce Young in the ways that they will be this week against Cincinnati. So give me the Bengals.
I think this point spread of 3.5 bakes in a lot of the narrative of September for the Bengals. And last week they did nothing to debunk that. But we have to remember it was a divisional game against Cleveland. And I didn't think Cleveland had that much on defense. So I really think that it's Myles Garrett and a bunch, Denzel Ward, maybe a bunch of but they did. They dropped the shell pretty well. They got enough pressure. And what Burrow wants to do is he wants to hunt some downfield plays. And he didn't have time, and the coverage is good there. And it just was kind of a perfect storm against him. Well, the coverage in Jacksonville isn't going to be that. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins will get open quickly. And Nick mentioned the pass rush. Yeah, but Burrow's used to that. As long as he could get the ball to the receivers, which last week he couldn't as much, that'll be there. So he'll get it done. So like Nick said, this is like a real good get-right spot for the Bengals. Last week, disappointment, but they should win this one pretty handily. All right, let's get to round 3. And we have 4 differing games, so it'll be 4 different thoughts here. Bill, start us out with you like an over-under in the Pittsburgh-Seattle game.
Look, let's pay our respects. Aaron Rodgers, home opener. Steelers scored 34 points last week. This total has gone down from 42.5 to 39.
Wow.
I like the over at 42.5. I love the over at 39. I'm not sure that the Seahawks are going to really be able to stop Pittsburgh, or at least stop them enough from putting maybe 28 to 34 points on the board. So I really need like a touchdown and a field goal from Seattle here. That's really all I'm asking for. And I think we can get to 28 to 10, or 28-14 maybe, or 27 or 31 to 10 or something along those lines. I just like this game. This game sort of smells to me like one where it's all over maybe in the first half, because it appears like, yeah, this is definitely going to be the under. I'm just not buying it. Sam Darnold, is working through it in Seattle for sure. But I think he's got to be good for 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh's defense. I mean, if the Jets can score 32 points, certainly Sam Darnold, once drafted by the Jets, could score 20 or 14. So I'm really looking at this from that perspective of, there's obviously a lot of money coming on here on this total to move it 3 points. But I'm going to stick with my initial thoughts, just because of the fact that you got Rodgers homecoming and he's going to want to show out, and maybe the Seahawks, add on a junk TD at the end to get us over this number.
Now, Adam, Bill had mentioned the New York Jets, who scored 32 points. You like the Jets this week. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they looked, I think the Steelers have a pretty premier defense. The Jets, threw for nearly 220. They rushed for 180. They scored 30-plus points. By the way, I do like the Steelers minus 2.5, too. That's one of my favorite picks. When Mike Tomlin allows 30 points or more the last 11 times, they've covered 10 out of 11 the following week. So I think I agree. I think they're going to bounce back. I think they're going to score a lot of points. But here, another cool trend: home underdogs getting 7 or more have covered 18 of the last 19 times. That is a pretty wild stat. That means we like the Jets. They outgained Pittsburgh by 120 plus yards. in week 1. So I don't know if it was a fluke or what was happening, or if just Justin Fields looked the part. He looked like a poised, like a quarterback who should be leading a team. So I don't know if it's just the coaching there, but I like what New York is doing, and Buffalo. You can't discount what Buffalo is doing. Certainly, what they did at the end of the game against Baltimore was outrageous. But Josh Allen has saved his worst games for AFC East road opponents, and that's a spot here. I think the Jets should come in with some confidence, even though they didn't get it done last week. I think they know they can score on Buffalo. It's just about can they hang? And I think at home, I think they can. So +7, I think, is a good enough number to go with the JETS for at least 1 week.
Hey, and even the emotional factor on this, it was a big, big draining victory for the Bills last week. And the human element says you get up for every game, but we know that's not true. It's a divisional opponent, but they certainly wanted that same level of enthusiasm they had for the Ravens. That's just a little throw in there, but you're spot on as always with the call on that one. That offense did look really good, Adam. Nick, why don't you tell us about the over and under in the Rams-Titans game?
Yeah, so this is a number that's been on the move throughout the week. What was up at, I think, 44 and a half at open, now down to 41 and a half. We got it at 42. So kind of wish we would have jumped in earlier, but still comfortable playing the under here. First of all, you have two very slow-paced teams. Both these teams played slowly last season. Both were bottom 10 in number of plays run last week. Last year we often saw the Rams as a fairly efficient offense. They sustained drives. They were top 5 in the league in plays per drive, top 5 in time per drive, but they're one of those teams that doesn't have these 12, 13 drive games. They're able to sustain drives. They don't always cash them in. They're actually a pretty poor red zone team last season. So they're not explosive. And obviously Tennessee, not explosive right now either. I mean, going up against the best defense, in my opinion, in the NFL last week on the road was a brutal spot for Cam Ward, but it's hard to come away, overly encouraged by what we saw from the Titans. I do think the Tennessee defense is maybe a little bit better than we're giving it credit for. Bo Nix obviously played a horrendous game in week 1, but I do think the defense had something to do with that. Rams, of course, have a great pass rush behind Jared Verse. So I don't see either team, necessarily running away with this game. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid down in Nashville. Rams have to travel across the country. I think this is one where you just show up, you take care of business. You don't have to do anything flashy. I will say, I do think Cam Ward was a little bit better than the numbers showed last week against Denver. Still hard to have a ton of faith in him. I think the Titans might be the worst coached team in the NFL as far as how much you trust their head coach to make the right decision. But I ultimately see this as a lower scoring game. And to give you a stat here, if you want to trend, number 1 pick quarterbacks, number 1 overall picks. We know they struggle in week 1. They don't do a whole lot better in week 2. Those quarterbacks 5-23 straight up, 11-15-2 against the number. Those quarterbacks 3-11 straight up in week 2 at home. So if you are thinking about a side here, maybe that pushes you a little bit more toward the LA Rams. Stafford and McVay, by the way, 31-9 straight up as a favorite. But my play on this game, the under 42. I don't think we see a lot of points.
My last pick, I like the Vikings -3.5 against Atlanta. We saw the Monday night game with the Bears, and the Vikings, they didn't necessarily look great. They pulled off a win. But here's the thing that gets lost. The Vikings really figured out how important their run game was, especially in the second half of that game. And they upgraded that interior offensive line. And during the offseason, they brought in Jordan Mason. And Mason is a real deal. And Atlanta is going to struggle to slow that rushing attack down. And you can't really stack the box. Justin Jefferson is like the automatic antidote for that. Because if you don't put somebody over the top, he will shred you regardless of quarterback. So Atlanta's going to have their hands full on defense. Other side of the ball, Michael Penix is in for a big hurt in this one, because you think about he had his on and off against Tampa last week. The looks he's going to see from Brian Flores. Don't forget, this is Penix's 5th start, and he has not had a difficult start. This one, he is going to see the kitchen sink come at him, and he is not going to have answers. Drake London's banged up. The running game went for 2 yards a carry last week. Vikings interior, they brought in Hargrave. They brought in Jonathan Allen. They really look good, even though they're aging. So, yeah, the Vikings, we should steamroll in this one. Let's get some final thoughts for week 2. Bill Speros, what you got for us?
All right, I have 5 quick final thoughts. Thought number 1, unders were 14-2 last week. File that away for next season. The public got clobbered last week. The public was 3-13 on the number. Good start for the books, for sure. Crazy. How crazy is gambling? This week, The Patriots are favorites on the road. The Chiefs are underdogs at home. That's a stunner. And finally, as I've noted on bookies.com several times and elsewhere, it's telling that the NFL scheduled this Super Bowl matchup this season in week 2. I believe Park Avenue sensed that the Chiefs aren't necessarily going to be as good as they were in the past. And as we saw against Los Angeles, they didn't have that one-score magic this year that they had last year. They're already 0-1 in one-score games. They were 12-0 one-score games last year. That's all I got.
Adam Thompson, what's closing thought for us?
Well, he pretty much took all my closing thoughts. The under, that was the lowest mark in the under in 25 years, which is pretty wild. The 3-13 marked by the public, 18%. That's not going to get it done. Favorites, by the way, went 13-3 straight up though. Against the spread, I think it was 9-7. But that was the second straight year that favorites have kind of led the way to at least start a season. They were 13-3 last year, and they're 13-3 this year.
Nick Whalen.
Well, just to pile on the public here, you guys know I play in the Circa Million contest. I track that very closely throughout the year, and I heard on a podcast from my one of my pals over at VSiN this week that week 1 was the worst week in the history of the contest. I don't know how long the contest has been going on, but a number of years. We've had, I would think over 100 weeks worth of contest plays at this point. It was the single lowest win percentage. And in this contest, you pick 5 games against the spread each week. So the worst week ever in the Circa Million contest. The 5 most popular picks all lost. 10 of the top 12 most popular picks in the contest all went down. But that is beside the point, guys. What I want to talk about here, kickoff returns. We are back, baby. 76% of kickoffs were returned in week 1. That was the most in 15 years, the most since week 17 of the 2010 season. Compare that to last year when we thought we might see a bump in kickoff returns. Only 33% of kickoffs ended up being returned a year ago. Touchbacks, of course, now at the 35-yard line. And really, over half of the league, opted against touchbacks last season. No team kicked a touchback on every one of its kickoffs. Overall, last week, average starting field position was about 5 yards closer than it was a year ago. Still saw a ton of unders, of course, so it didn't necessarily matter in terms of scoring. But I'm really interested to see if this keeps up. I think it will for the most part, but it's going to make for some really interesting decisions for a lot of teams. And we didn't necessarily see this in week 1, but I think we're going to see more turnovers on kickoff returns as well. That's what I'm thinking. When I'm betting these games, I'm watching a cornerback or like your 6th receiver back there receiving a kick. And you're just thinking, hold on for dear life, man. Don't fumble that ball. Again, we didn't see any of those killer turnovers in week 1, but I think we're going to see games swing on that as the year goes along.
I'm going to pile on that a little bit. So you are going to keep seeing kick returns because the expected points with the ball on the former 30-yard line is a 35 now, correct? 35 for touchback, right? 30-yard line was 1 to 1.5 expected points per drive. From the 35, expected points go from 1 to 1.5 to 1.5 to 2. That is a massive shift in 5 yards of field position. And the teams knew that going in. They know that data very well. So you have to put that ball in play because that 5 yards, that means a lot of extra scoring. Now, the one thing I don't know if teams will do, but I was saying this last year, and now knowing there's going to be fewer touchbacks, I wonder when we start to see some skill position players returning kicks, because the way it's set up, there are not big collisions. The defenders are coming from close. It's not these full field launching them at full speed. Not the case. And they could really leverage it. But I don't know if teams will be willing to do that. But that would really flip the equation. If you begin to see it, it could become a trend. But for right now, Nick is right. You are going to see kick returns this year, and that's going to make a difference. All right, everybody, this has been the Bookies Plus Weekly Gambling Show. Make sure you bookmark bookies.com/picks so you can check out our free picks on sports all year long for both NFL and other sports. Have a great, profitable week, too, and we'll see everyone next week.